My name's Jake. I'm 28. I work with my hands, fixing things other people have given up on. Old clocks, broken fences, leaky pipes. There's something honest about repairs. You see what's wrong and you put it back together. Simple, predictable. I wish people were like that. A few weeks ago, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in a while. Melissa, my former high school English teacher. More than a teacher, really, she had been a presence in my life. The kind of person who noticed when you didn't say things, who understood silences better than noise. I hadn't seen her in years, maybe since I graduated. "Jake," she said, "I'm sorry to bother you. I heard from someone that you work with would now." "Yeah," I said. "Cabinetry, small restorations. What's up?" "I have something I can't fix. It's not urgent, just a jammed door. In the back room. Could have been anyone. A handyman, a neighbor." But she called me, and I said yes. I pulled into her driveway late on a cloudy Tuesday afternoon. The sky was soft gray, like it might rain but hadn't decided yet. Her house sat on a quiet street lined with maples that had begun to drop their leaves. Everything about the place looked familiar, but different, like a memory that had been quietly aging without me. When I knocked, the door opened slowly, and there she was, Melissa. She hadn't changed much, still had that calmness to her, that way of standing still like the whole world was behind her eyes. Her hair was darker now, straighter, pulled back into a low twist. She wore a deep green sweater, fitted jeans, no shoes. Her expression was unreadable at first until she smiled. Just slightly. "Jake," she said. "Hi," I replied. "Still got that stuck door?" She let out a soft breath that might have been a laugh. "Something like that. Come in." The house was warm but quiet. No TV, no music, just the soft creak of wood under my boots and the smell of cinnamon or cloves in the air. She gestured for me to follow. The hallway looked the same, photos still on the wall, though dustier now. A few of the frames were crooked. I noticed one of them still had the photo of our senior class, the one where I was standing near the back, arms crossed, pretending not to care. She led me to a door at the end of the hallway. It was painted white like the others, but the knob was older, brass, slightly tarnished. She stopped just short of it. "It's this one," she said. "It sticks. Or maybe it doesn't. Honestly, I haven't opened it in a long time." I raised an eyebrow. "What's inside?" She hesitated, then looked at me. "Nothing bad. Just things I put away." "Want me to take a look?" "Eventually," she said. "But first, tea." We went back to the kitchen. She poured hot water over 2 bags in ceramic mugs and pushed one toward me. She still moved like someone who noticed everything. Her sleeves were pushed up to her elbows, and I noticed the faint scar on her forearm. One I remembered from school, though she never said how she got it. "I didn't expect you to say yes," she said. "Why not? You disappeared after graduation." "I left town, came back. Life got in the way." Her eyes searched mine. "You've always been better at showing up when it matters." That struck deeper than I expected. We sipped in silence for a while, the kind of silence that was never awkward with her. It felt like she was waiting for something, though I didn't know what. Question maybe, or an answer I didn't know I had. After we finished our tea, she walked back toward the hallway. I followed. She stopped again in front of the same closed door. Her hand hovered near the knob, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she turned to me. "If you cross that door," she said, "you'll know everything." It wasn't a dare. It wasn't flirtation. It was a statement, a warning, or a promise. I looked at the door, then back at her, and I said nothing. Not yet. I didn't open the door that day. Melissa didn't push. She simply said, "Another time," and walked away like it was never meant to be more than that. But the words she left me with hung in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't dig out. "You'll know everything." I didn't know what everything meant, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. But I kept thinking about that brass doorknob, slightly tarnished and untouched, like it had waited too long to be noticed. 2 days later, I found myself back in front of her house. No job to do, no tools in hand, just me and a head full of unasked questions. I told myself I was checking on the door, but deep down, I knew I wasn't there for the door. Melissa opened it like she'd been expecting me. "Hi," I said. She didn't ask why I came, just nodded slightly. Tea again. This time it was mint, and the kettle was already warm. We sat across from each other at her small kitchen table. The light from the late afternoon sun came in through the slatted blinds, casting lines across her cheekbones and the corner of her mouth. She looked softer in that light, younger somehow, or maybe just more unguarded. "You never married," she said suddenly. I blinked. "No." She stirred her tea with the end of her spoon, slowly. "You used to talk about building your own house. Thought you'd have someone to build it for. I guess life got smaller than I planned." Melissa smiled faintly. "That's the thing about plans. Sometimes they hide the real stuff underneath." She didn't mention herself, but I knew she'd never married either. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was thick with all the words we weren't saying. Memories left behind, glances that once meant nothing and now felt like questions. I remembered being 17, sitting in her classroom after school, asking about college applications. I remembered how she used to pause before answering, like she wanted me to say more than I ever did. I remembered the way she'd look at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not inappropriate, never crossing the line, but human, tender. Now here we were, like two people 10 years later with the same old quiet hanging between us, but no desks or excuses to separate it. "Do you ever miss teaching?" I asked. She nodded. "Some days. I miss the feeling of being useful." "You still are." She looked at me, and her eyes lingered. "Not to most people." "You were to me," I said. "You still are." Later, as the light dimmed, she walked me to the front door. I expected her to say goodbye, maybe another gentle, polite exit like before. Instead, she paused. Then she asked, "Do you want to stay a little longer?" There was no question in her tone, only vulnerability, like she was afraid the answer would shape something she couldn't unshape. So I said yes. She turned and led me not down the hall to that door, but into the living room. We sat on the couch, closer than earlier, her knees tucked up under her, mine planted on the floor. She poured us both a small glass of red wine from an open bottle on the side table. Everything was quiet except the sound of a clock ticking behind us. "You always seemed older than the other boys," she said, holding her glass. "Quieter, like you noticed things they didn't. Maybe I just didn't know how to talk. You knew how to listen." There was something about her voice that night. Not louder, not softer, but open, honest. The way people sound when they've decided not to pretend anymore. I asked, "Why that door?" She turned her head slightly, but didn't look away. "It's just a room," she said. "But what's inside? It's my version of truth. And I haven't let anyone inside in a long time." "Is it about me?" "In part," she whispered. Not in the way you think. But you were there. In pieces of it. Moments I stored away. Then she looked directly into my eyes and said it again, this time softer. If you cross that door, Jake, you'll know everything. But she didn't say it to warn me. She said it like she wanted me to. And suddenly I knew. This wasn't about fixing an old door. This was about opening one. It rained the next time I went to see her. Thin, quiet rain. The kind that doesn't demand anything, it just stays. It made the streets look silver and the windows mist over as I pulled into her driveway. I wasn't sure what I expected. But when Melissa opened the door and saw me, damp from the walk-up, no umbrella, no excuse, she didn't ask why I came. She just stepped aside. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the gentle pattering of rain on the roof and the ticking of that same wall clock. She led me to the living room without a word. There was a throw blanket folded neatly over the armrest. A candle lit in the corner. The space smelled like warm cedar and something faintly floral. Clean, thoughtful, like she was preparing for someone, but wasn't sure they'd arrive. We sat again, this time closer. My arm brushed hers. Neither of us moved away. You know, she said quietly, when you were in my class, I always knew you'd leave. I tilted my head. That obvious, huh? She smiled. No, not in the way you think. You were always half here and half somewhere else. Like you had a suitcase packed in your mind. I didn't have much choice. She looked at me. But you did. You came back. And I realized what she was really asking. Why now? Why me? I took a breath. Because I never finished a conversation with you that I always wanted to. She blinked slowly, then said, maybe it's time we did. She stood and walked down the hallway. This time she didn't hesitate. She stopped in front of the white door and looked back at me, her fingers grazing the brass handle. I followed. She rested her palm on the knob, but didn't turn it yet. Before I open this, I want you to know something. I waited. I was never supposed to feel anything for you, she whispered. And I didn't. Not then. I made sure of it. Her voice trembled slightly. But later, after you left, I missed you more than a teacher should miss a former student. I told myself it was pride, that I wanted you to succeed. But when I found myself walking past the park you used to go to, or listening to songs you once mentioned, I knew it wasn't just pride. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Then, finally, she turned the knob. The room was small, dimly lit. Dust lingered in the corners. But it wasn't cold. It was preserved. A single armchair, a worn rug, a desk with a closed journal, a framed photo of her and a younger version of herself, and right beside it, tucked just behind a lamp, a class photo from my senior year. I stepped closer. A yellow sticky note was pressed into the corner of the frame. It said only, "You always saw me." My breath caught. I looked to the desk. The journal was old leather, well handled. With a trembling hand, I opened it. The first few pages were normal. Quotes, poetry, notes about literature. Then an entry with a date I remembered. The week I graduated. She had written, "He said goodbye like he didn't mean it. He looked at me like he wanted to stay." I wanted to ask him what he saw when he looked at me, but I didn't, because that would have changed everything. Page after page, I read moments I never knew she noticed. How I lingered by her desk. How I defended her when other students mocked her soft-spoken style. How I seemed older than the others, but sadder too. One entry simply said, "Sometimes I hear footsteps on the porch and wonder if it's him. I never lock the back door, just in case he comes back." Isn't that foolish? I looked up. Melissa was standing in the doorway, watching me. You wrote about me, I said, my voice low. I wrote about the silence you left behind, she said. It was the only way I could make sense of it. And now, I don't want to write anymore, she whispered. I want to speak, if you'll let me. There was no drama in her words, no games, only a woman who had carried something quietly for far too long, and a man finally brave enough to listen. I closed the journal, walked over to her. I crossed the door, I said. Her eyes shimmered. So, what do you know now? She asked. I reached for her hand, held it. That you waited, that you never stopped wondering. That maybe, neither did I. We didn't go back to the living room right away. After I closed the journal, Melissa just stood there, quiet. Her hand still rested in mine, not tightly, but like it had finally found something familiar after being lost for too long. The rain outside had stopped. I could hear water dripping from the gutters, the steady tick of the hallway clock, and the sound of her breathing. Everything else was still. Do you regret writing all that? I asked gently. No, she whispered. I regret never saying it out loud. And now she had. We left the room together. Not a word passed between us as she shut the door. Not with urgency, but with peace. It no longer needed to stay open. I had seen everything she'd been holding in, and something in both of us changed. We sat side by side on the couch again, the same spot where she'd offered me wine and silence. Only this time the silence was full of knowing. I kept that room like a secret, she said after a while. I never knew if I wanted someone to find it, or if I was just afraid no one ever would. I turned slightly toward her. And now that I did, she met my eyes. That same gaze I'd remembered from years ago, but different now. Older, stronger, no longer hiding behind rules or excuses. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. And I don't want you to leave without knowing everything. I studied her expression. Her lips parted slightly like she was about to say something else, but stopped herself. I leaned back. What if I told you I never really left? Melissa tilted her head. You're here now. No, I mean all those years. I never stopped wondering about you. I thought maybe I made it all up. That the looks, the conversations, the feeling I couldn't explain. Maybe it was one-sided. Just a young guy misreading kindness. Her voice broke a little. It wasn't. I was just too scared to admit I saw you too. I don't remember who moved first, but suddenly her hand was on my cheek. My fingers gently brushed the side of her neck. There was no rush, no heat, just the slow, deliberate collapse of years of restraint. Her lips were soft, like the words she always wanted to say but couldn't. When we pulled away, she rested her forehead against mine. I never thought this would happen, she said. Neither did I. But I wanted it to. Me too. And just like that, the space between past and present vanished. We spent the evening talking, not flirting, not tiptoeing, just speaking honestly about everything we had left unsaid. About how she used to circle my name on papers just a little longer than needed. About how I used to walk by her office, pretending I had questions I didn't just to hear her talk. About how life took us separate ways, but somehow that thread never snapped. She laughed when I reminded her how nervous I was to give my senior speech, and how she was the one who told me, people only remember the moments you meant, not the words you rehearsed. I confessed how I still hear that in my head every time I have to speak up in a room full of strangers. I'm glad I mattered, she said softly. You still do. It was late when she asked, "Do you want to stay?" I didn't answer with words. I just nodded. She didn't lead me upstairs. Instead, we stayed downstairs, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder as the candle burned lower and the clock ticked into midnight. I held her hand. She traced small circles with her thumb on the back of mine. There was no need for anything else that night. No promises, no declarations. We had crossed the door, and we both knew, once you do that, you don't go back. Weeks later, I came by again. Not by accident. Not to fix anything. Just to be with her. I had my own key now. The door down the hallway stayed closed. Not because we were hiding anything anymore, but because it no longer held the weight it once did. It had served its purpose. It had brought us here. To now. To each other.